today we'll be going through some of the highlights of the 2023 legislative session this year and the work that we're doing removing obstacles through policy for the passport population. And I'm going to move on and just we decided to make this meeting today a meeting format, excuse me, rather than a webinar, because we really do want this to be interactive. So please feel free to raise your hand so that we can call on you at any point during our presentation. There are terms, legislative as well as part of the policies themselves that are confusing potentially. So we want to make sure that there's clarity. Of course, you can also use the chat. So we do have Mustafa here and Donna also helping to look for those questions. And the meeting's also being recorded, so you can refer to it later and have others who weren't able to join. And we'll be posting that as usual on our WPN YouTube channel as well as WPN website. So we're actually doing a panel of 3 of us today. I think I know you all, but if not, I'm Juliet Schindler, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Strategic Partnerships at CSF. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Stochel, the Program Manager of Government Relations and Advocacy here at CSF. And I'll pass it to Curtis.
Hello, everyone. A lot of you know me. I'm Curtis. I'm a graduate assistant in Eastern. No fancy titles here.
And a recent graduate, I believe, or about to be.
That's right. MSW.
Woohoo! That's awesome. That's a fancy title. We'll be hearing more from Curtis later. He's our special guest today. So just to recap, the WPN, of course, is comprised of individuals like yourself who have various roles supporting students who have experienced foster care or unaccompanied homelessness or both. So these webinars are here to bring relevant information and education and networking opportunities for you all. This webinar today, I really want to call out the work that we've been doing and the support that we've been getting from the Passport leadership team. And we have several work groups, and the PLT advising structure work group has been working for over the past year with 2 main objectives. You can see them on the screen, but basically we're trying to figure out what is the most effective way for PLT members to give recommendations on either potential legislation or existing legislation, because that has not been a clearly understood process. And in a similar way, what would be the best advising structure for the PLT to fulfill its mandate under the RCW of giving policy, procedure, and implementation recommendations to the Washington Student Achievement Council? We have been doing various things to further this work over the course of session, including a weekly recap of the goals. At the beginning of session, we had some check-ins, but virtual check-ins. And we've done a couple different trainings in the past, which many of you have been able to attend. So I want to say thank you to the work group members. Their names are here. It's really been a wonderful group that I've been just thrilled to work with. A lot more to do, but you'll be hearing today of ways that we want to get more input engagement from you in this process. So you will be part of the conversation. So along those lines, for our icebreaker today, we're going to break into 5 breakout rooms and just have a general conversation about engagement. And I'm hopeful that many or most of you were able to attend our recent Passport conference. Rise Up was the theme, resources and inspiration for student success and engagement. And for those of you who were there, there was we did hear with some of our speakers this kind of what I would say is a call to action for engagement on policy. And first and foremost, that message really came loud and clear from Senator Yasmin Trudeau, who you see in this picture. As someone with lived experience herself and having gone through this amazing career journey to where she is now as a really influential and wonderful member of the Washington State Senate. So we're going to take, Mustafa, if you could, when you break us up, we want to spend 10 minutes in these breakout rooms. And you can see just these general questions. Hopefully you were able to attend the conference and hear her remarks. Did this call to action inspire you? And what is that inspiring you to do? What is one next step you could do to begin engaging in advocacy? Whether it's actually attending a meeting with a legislator, or as small as learning more, or just having coffee with other advocates to talk about some options, etc. Are there barriers? Either, and this can range from just kind of lack of comfort around doing this work to I'm not sure how to approach this with my agency. This doesn't feel like something that I could do because of where I work. So with that, like I said, we're going to break into 5 groups, breakout rooms, take 10 minutes to have this discussion. And I look forward to hearing some highlights when we get back.
Juliet, when you do, will these questions be in all the breakout rooms so we have them in front of us, please?
Thank you, Laura. I'll put them in the chat.
Thank you.
See Mary. Let me know if you have any difficulty in getting any of your breakout rooms, and I can help pop up the screen again.
Am I invited to one?
Yes, let me put Mary and Johnny in a breakout room. 1 second. Mary, I've assigned you to room 5.
Mustafa, I'm sorry, I can't join. I'm with students.
Oh, no worries.
So I'm just trying to listen in as much as I can grab hold of.
All good. Sounds
I'm
good.
sorry, thank you.
No worries. And Juliet, have you not received a link to join?
No, I have a screen that says breakout rooms in progress. Oh, and there's buttons that say join.
Yes, so you can join. Let me see 1 second. You can join room 1.
Yes, okay, we'll do.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Mustafa. I got kicked out of my room. There was something with my Wi-Fi, but can I get sent back to that room?
Yes, no worries. What room number do you know?
Ooh, it might have been 1. It's with Melissa Fike, and I didn't see the other person in it. Or you could throw me anywhere. That's okay.
Room 2 then. All
Nice
good.
to see you, Mustafa.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, that is so good.
Similarly, flashback to, before I would have done any type of advocacy and going to like, this is back when I was go like decades ago, just going going to like lobby days for the first time. I very distinctly remember sitting in my first meeting as legislator, and you'd be so nervous and intimidated by like you know, but there is something I photo, perfect photo of the home. And it was to me, like, it is so important that we like kind of like take the shininess off of because it's built into the buildings are not built for the average person feel comfortable there. It's like I feel like so I appreciate that out. Marvel and so I think that for me to have a barrier that can't choose up your needs and opportunities. Yeah, I love that. That's such a good point. I mean, I think that too that certain people will say like these spaces for people like us, and I think to that with experts, but kind of us too, like with us being like schools. I think about organizational structure and like how the people who talk in these rooms and in this space connected to the students and like the people that these skills will impact and find. So it just reminds me of how important it is to like create that conversation that makes it close to everyone, so that you know, I have this funny story. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I have a friend with a disability. So I went to the legislature so nervous and I was like, and I go in his office and I know that fragile. And I just said, you like I had no, you know, I'm learning so much stuff. So that really calmed me. And they're just people, right? So I was just barrel on into the office and just start talking to them because, you know, they really are. It is. It's not theirs. They're temporarily. But I always keep that in mind, and I miss being able to go up there. Because it was so much fun. They're just the best, you know, and a lot of times they're just reading the knowledge that they don't understand. So, yeah, really good point. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a little really thought it through. It's just I mean, I can do stuff on my personal email. You get start out with a proper president, if I think I'm thinking a little bit of, you know, you know, so I might be able to enable my way someway, but that's so amazing to hear. Oh my God. Then again, the how. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, biggest barrier for me is like feeling like I potentially undergraduate. I did it like 15 minutes, good with her. And then she reached out, fine. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that's really fun, especially with the expected. And when you mentioned the website, I wonder if that would be like maybe you can get your advice. Hey there.
Hi there.
How are you?
Very good. I'm here to return this book.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, I've got you. Thank you so much.
Yay. Have a great day. Here's my snacks for all of campus, guys. What's his first name? Eric. Wendy, hello.
This is Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
I'm gonna potentially be a student in the summer, but
Are there any other lobby days other than the one Mockingbird does that we should have on our radar? Because I'm also thinking like that would be helpful to have a calendar of those that are relevant.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's definitely something we can put together. I know there are at least like a handful. I don't remember what they are at the top of my head, but maybe Juliet and I can touch base on that and then send out a list.
And FYI, I didn't hear what this question was, so that's all right. You can tell me later.
Okay.
All right, welcome back, everyone. As I pull up this screen again, and please raise your hand if you feel like there was something you heard in your group that you think would be great to share out with the broader group. Okay, not seeing any. Let's keep moving because we have a lot to cover. So today, I want to invite you, we hopped right into that without me asking, but please, I do want to invite you to feel free to put your name and organization pronouns, and if you would like your the tribal lands on which you're located today in the chat to get a feel for everyone who's here. So our agenda will be, we're just going to briefly do an overview of what is a long legislative session, which is what we just ended, and what are the highlights of that session. And then we're going to go through legislation that passed, and so that we're going to focus on those that are of most interest to this population. And then also look at some other relevant bills and highlights of items in the operating budget. And then as time allows, some bills that didn't get passed. And one of those will have our guest speaker, Curtis, highlighting. So let's jump right in. For those of you who aren't involved more directly in this work, a long legislative session, how it works is it's set up in a biennium, and the biennium is broken into 2 years, as would make sense by the name. And the odd years are a long legislative session, which is 105 days. And the main reason to have a longer legislative session is because that's the year that a budget has to be figured out, written, and approved. And the budget is for 2 years. It also is written with a 4-year outlook in mind. Just, I think that's less known. So as you get involved in this work, you understand that the legislators who are working on the fiscal matters have to think ahead. That's not true in other states, most other states. So they really do look at long-term impacts of financial commitments. And then next year will be a 60-day short session, which is where there'll be a supplemental budget written that will just make up for any unforeseen shifts, for example, in caseloads, unforeseen other fiscal implications that need to the idea is to have corrections to the budget, adjustments, not new funding, although there's always exceptions to that. So the biennial budget was a big part of what happened this year. And we did end on time, April 23rd. And that has been the case for a number of years now. And one of the reasons for that is one party is in control of both chambers and the governor's office, which makes for that the majority party having ultimate power over the final budget, as well as kind of who's chairing the committees, some of the other kind of powerful mechanisms are controlled by that one party. And so makes things go usually a little more smoothly. What was different this year and it did have quite an impact is the ESSER, or the pandemic funding that we received for pandemic learning loss. And I'm sure you're all familiar with, there's a number of different tranches of these dollars coming in. With those dollars, the ESSER dollars, that funding ending, and a lot of organizations were coming and probably, I'm not as familiar with the effect on agencies, but local schools, organizations coming and saying, okay, so we got these dollars, we put in this programming to support students. We don't want to just end that program and leave students, kind of in this bad place. So having being flush with dollars when the pandemic funding was coming in, and then saying, okay, that's it, created this dynamic, which was unusual and tricky, and made for the end of session a little bit confusing for organizations who were still committed some ESSER dollars, but that's like a whole nother webinar. But it did add some interesting twists. So for you all who are working with students who have experienced foster care and or homelessness, there are a number of bills that we couldn't cover, obviously, all of them. So we selected some that we think are relevant, and we're going to jump into going through those. And I'll hand it over to Emily to start.
Thanks, Juliet. Yeah, so we wanted to start with House Bill 1559, which establishes the Student Basic Needs at Public Post-Secondary Institutions Act. And I think most of you on this call are familiar with the survey that WASAC administered through post-secondary public institutions, which kind of evaluated basic needs and the impact when those are not met. And unsurprisingly, we saw, a really strong correlation between more barriers with people who are facing housing and food insecurity and being able to succeed academically. And there's people on this call, especially from WASAC, that can speak much more in detail about this. So that's something that we can go over more a little bit later if needed. But essentially, this has a few different parts to the bill. It requires employment of a benefits navigator at each institution of higher education and the tribal college. It creates hunger-free and basic needs campus strategic plans. It creates a student basic needs survey, and it enacts the free and reduced price meals pilot program. And then I'll pass it to Juliet in case she has anything to say about the funding for this one.
Sure. You'll see with some of these, in general, with most of these bills, the funding is general fund state. About 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, the Washington Education Investment Account was set up, and that's so when we refer to WIA, that's what we're referring to. And the short of it is these are funds that are coming from companies who are like higher tech companies, high demand kind of degrees, those companies who fall into that realm. So corporate, it's a corporate tax that goes into this account, and the money needs to be used to support higher ed, and it's pretty broad in how it's can be used. So you may have heard of it. The main reason it passed is when we went from the state need grant to the Washington College grant, and WIA is primary source of funding for the Washington College grant. But this year it's been used for a number of other bills as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Juliet. So the next one we wanted to talk about was House Bill 1406, and this was concerning youth seeking housing assistance and other related services. So this bill was a legacy topic at the Mockingbird Society, which also means that it was developed in partnership with Mockingbird chapter members with lived experience. And I'll drop the one-pager later in the chat, but this one was partially funded at $1.562 million. And this bill allows youth under the age of 18 and accompanied, currently unhoused, or living in a situation that is unsafe or harmful to consent to stay in a safe and supportive place, even if their parent or legal guardian is not available or willing to give consent. So with this bill, youth will have access to supportive services upon self-consenting to temporary safe shelter. And then there's a little bit more details in the slide specifically. If you have any questions, and in the bill, it's linked. So once we send this out, you'll be able to look at the report and things like that. But one additional piece of information, actually there's a couple, is that it requires DCYF to offer family reconciliation services to families or youth after receiving a report that a youth is away from a lawfully prescribed residence as soon as possible. And it increases the length of time that a youth may remain in a Hope Center to 90 days from 30 days. And I think we can go ahead and move to the next one. Thank you, perfect. So this next one is House Bill 1580. And this is around creating a system to support children in crisis. And I'll say this bill felt really relevant because since we're working with students that are experiencing foster care and unaccompanied homelessness, there's these are kids who are gone through crises or are currently going through a crisis. So this one was funded at $6 million in the final budget, and this bill would implement a children and youth multi-system care coordinator to work with children that are connected to several systems and in crisis. This bill is a partnership with DSHS, DCYF, OFM, which is the Office of Financial Management, and HCA, which is the Healthcare Authority. This is to address children that are in hospitals for crises that are not related to medical needs, but more so mental health. And should the child meet certain standards, DCYF may also be able to offer the family a voluntary placement agreement and work with this multi-system care coordinator on identifying services for the child and their family. An important aspect of this bill is that it includes a pot of flexible funds to support the safe discharge of children in crisis from hospitals and long-term appropriate placement for children who are dependent. And I will pass it off to Juliet to kind of go over this bill.
Sure. Project Education Impact, many of you are aware of PEI, as we refer to it. We have Fred and other members here in the group. And this was begun, this past year had the 5-year anniversary of PEI. And it began as an effort to bring together state agencies and nonprofits who wanted to come together and really figure out how to reach parity in educational attainment for students who have experienced foster care and or unaccompanied or homelessness. And this began as a work group, and then it's gone through a couple different iterations of, it was put into statute with a bill that we worked, primarily Treehouse worked with Senator Carlisle at the time, and that established certain things and broadened like the students who were kind of the designated students we were supporting. Then there was another bill passed which brought in members of the legislature to certain members of the legislature to be part of the work group. And this last year, it expired, or it was going to expire. So the main part of the bill was to extend the expiration date of the work group from next year to the end of 2028. And Fred, if you're willing, can I ask you if you wanted to speak to the fiscal note real briefly?
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, when I talk to people about PEI, it's a little bit complex of a story. So I sometimes just boil it down to say that this is a group that's really trying to work on systemic issues, especially data and funding issues, right? And we're really thrilled because we are working more and more closely every year with ERDC, the Education Data and Research Center. ERDC is just a critical partner in trying to collect the data that we need to understand student outcomes better. We've known for a long time that they actually have a lot of data and information about student outcomes for students who are experiencing foster care and homelessness in higher ed. But one of the main constraints that has prevented us from really having visibility into that data is they just have not had human capacity within ERDC to conduct the analysis. And so now they do. They got significant investment to hire a full-time researcher to do the data analysis for our students. So in a year or two, if you want to know what our access, retention, and completion rates are for passport students statewide, we should have that information readily available. And that's just the highest level. There's a lot of other data elements that we know from practitioners that are really, really critical to understand, to know if the interventions we're providing are effective or not, and how we can just continue to learn and do better services for young people. So yeah, really excited about the data that we'll be able to provide back to the community of practitioners and young people, so that we can understand this information and we can apply it to our continued program development and advocacy. Thanks, Juliet.
Yeah, it is very exciting. Thank you, Fred. We're going to go through some other bills, and these are also relevant, just a little more broad scope. At CSF, I think about, in general, kind of our buckets are affordability, access, support. So there's some groupings here that you'll see. So one of the bills, the House Bill 1238, that was passed, will establish universal free meals at public schools. And these are for public schools who serve kids in grades K through 4. Doesn't have to be just K through 4, but including K through 4, and have high percentages of students who are identified as low income. So any student in that school will have access to the free meal. It won't be, there won't be any kind of stigmatization or selecting out of students. But it means with this funding of $16 million for FY25, then over 200 Washington schools will have universal meals for the 2 years for their students. And then we have a House Bill 1622, and there's both OSPI and Department of Commerce that has grant programs for students experiencing homelessness. So it's kind of a little bit of kind of a cleanup in that as far as aligning program goals and establishing common reporting requirements. And then there was, I'm sure OSPI could speak more to what the permitted expenditures for the OSPI program, kind of the background on that. If anyone from OSPI wants to share more, feel free to put that in the chat. Then another big push this year, as in recent years, that really does tackle both affordability and access, is broadly dual credit. And that could be college and the high school, Running Start, you know, all the different programs that fall under the dual credit umbrella. And this is important because it, with students who have some type of dual, the research has shown students who have some type of dual credit during their high school years are more likely both to enroll in and succeed in post-secondary work. And then on the affordability side, there's a number of traditionally a number of fees. I mean, even to, you know, apply for for the program, to get the credits, to actually, like, you can do the course but not get the credits unless you pay for it. So a lot of equity issues around affordability and access. These two bills both tackle this in different ways. So eliminating the college and the high school fees with Senate Bill 5048. So higher ed institutions will provide the yes, enroll, be part of this college and the high school course if you're 9 through 12 in high school at no cost. And then that information needs to be in the catalog because we need students to learn about it. And also to notify parents or guardians by email, and then also in packets. So multimodal ways of getting this information out to students. And you'll see, again, this is coming from the Washington Education Investment Act, the WIA funds rather than general state. Then House Bill 1316 requires public schools to allow students to participate in Running Start. So, which means that they leave the campus, the high school campus, to go to the school that they're doing their Running Start courses, and that the students can be funded at a higher level. It used to be 1.2 FTE, now it's gone up to 1.4 FTE. So kind of an increase in that way. And then also allows more access for doing dual credit during the summer academic term. So fund enrollment in that for up to 10 college credits per summer academic term.
Yeah, so I'll just cover these three briefly. Thanks for going over those, Juliet. So these are all support-related bills that passed, and 5120 is about the 23-hour crisis relief centers. So this directs the Department of Health to license or certify 23-hour crisis relief centers, which is a new type of crisis diversion facility to serve persons regardless of behavioral acuity. There is 5256, which makes the child welfare housing program permanent through DCOF, and this used to be a pilot, and this increases the availability of housing so that families can be reunified, placement can be prevented, and young people don't exit foster care into homelessness. As you might be able to recognize, there were a lot of bills last year too that was around this track of making sure that young people don't exit foster care into homelessness. So this is a part of that kind of overall overarching goal. And the amount funded for that is $5.255 million. And then lastly, we have Women's Bill, which is 5243, and this is around high school and beyond plans. So this bill instructs OSPI to share policy recommendations around high school and beyond plans and update the high school beyond planning platform that's online.
Yeah, they will actually be selecting a new universal high school and beyond online platform. And the idea is to make this really an effective tool rather than one that's kind of a check the box drill, which is some of the feedback that's been gotten over the years, or received over the years. So we want to be conscious of time, and so we're just gonna like let you kind of look through this list of budget items that directly impact WPN students. And I will note that there's questions around some of these. In the cases, like you can see, we have with us today folks who've been involved with independent living, as well as the Treehouse Graduation Success program, that only partially received the funds they requested. So in cases like that, there's still work being done of, okay, so how are we going to make this work? Do we, do we just do part of the plan? Do we just extend it out further and find other resources? Do we come back next year for more dollars? So again, if you have, feel free to look through this. And then if you do have questions, you can go to the relevant person. And if you're not sure who that is, you can always reach out to me or Emily, and we'll help connect you to the right person.
Awesome. So while this was a really successful session, and as you can see, there were a lot of bills and budget items passed that can help advance the work to help provide equity to students experiencing foster care and homelessness. There's also, plenty high priority bills that did not pass this year that we will continue to support and kind of try to advance in the following years and next session and during the interim, of course. So some of these bills that are of high importance are 5230, which we'll go into in a little bit, which is around extended foster care services. This one is the post-extended foster care program. 5591, which is around providing dependent youth with financial education and support. And this is also a repeat item from last year with Mockingbird and a legacy item. 1045, also a repeat from last year, creating the Evergreen Basic Income Pilot. So this is the GBI bill, the Guaranteed Basic Income one. We've got the student transportation one. I think this was an OSPI request one, and this was around providing adequate and predictable student transportation. And there were specific provisions like for people experiencing foster care or homelessness. There's 1405, which is around preserving public benefit payments, so specifically SSI, to people in the care of DCYF. And then lastly, we have 1541, which is around establishing the Nothing About Us Without Us Act.
Okay, we're going to start our dive into 5230, Senate Bill 5230, with just a little piece of this clip, which you can watch the fuller clip later to do a little context setting. So here we go.
Upheaval and turmoil. I averaged 9 to 19 placements per year while in care. So I couldn't even tell you most of my foster parents' names.
So when he turned 18, he had the option to go out on his own or stay in the system in a program Washington implemented in 2013 called Extended Foster Care.
When you turn 18, you've got all this freedom, but then you also realize you've got very little to no support or social safety net. It's mixed feelings.
While Curtis decided to continue in care, he could not stay with his then foster mom. She didn't want anyone in her home older than 18. There was no one to take him. So Curtis lived on his own with a social worker to check in briefly once a month and a stipend from the state to pay his rent.
Either you do it or you basically become homeless. There's no real in between there.
Young people who go that route have to follow a number of guidelines, including being enrolled in classes and or having a job where they work at least 80 hours a month. If they decline extended foster care at any point, they cannot be re-enrolled. Now keep in mind, this program ends at age 21, but most students graduate college at 22 to 24 years old. What happens to young people aging out of extended foster care at 21, but the help runs out?
We know that young people clearly need support, and that support should be really throughout their young adulthood when we think about when their brains fully develop, and that's at age 25.
Senator Claire Wilson wants to change that. The Democrat.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Curtis to tell us about his journey with SB 5230.
Thanks so much for that. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, great. So I guess I'll start out with sort of how I got involved with this. Basically, Emily actually introduced this bill to me originally and sort of got me connected with some of the media folks and everything to talk about it. And it's twofold for me because I personally received extended foster care and I know how much it helped me. But I also know that the data shows, as I'm sure many of us are aware, that you actually complete a bachelor's degree in about 5 years instead of 4. And then former foster youth have slower graduation rates than your average college student. So instead of like, your average 4 to 5 years, they might graduate in 5 to 6, is what the data has shown us. So basically, I got involved because personally, I know the impacts of EFC and I know how much it could have helped me had it gone a little further. And then professionally speaking, I actually have had students who were receiving EFC where I work currently at Eastern Washington University, and they'll still be pursuing their degree, but then EFC is gone all of a sudden. And now they don't have nearly the same amount of financial support that they would need in a current housing crisis, as we're all aware. So they're all of a sudden not able to focus on their academics and they have to focus on all these other basic needs that EFC was helping them with. But since, again, foster youth tend to graduate at a slower rate from college, they're not able to finish their degree. So really, if we were able to extend it slightly longer, then there's a likelihood that they would actually complete that credential. So again, it's both personal and professional for me, seeing it from both sides of the table. And I guess I want to go over a little about, the ups and downs of it. Obviously, it was great that the media was interested and there were folks that were interested, and we had some great support from people like Senator Wilson, who sponsored the bill. I know my personal senator, Senator Andy Billig, was a huge champion for the bill as well. We talked a lot about that. But at the same time, one of the big challenges that we ran into was actually the fiscal note, which is something to consider. Basically, it's how much it would cost over a certain amount of time is the estimate. So originally for the 23 through 24 year, it would have been approximately 21 million. And then it was estimated by 2027 to 2029, it would have been 43 million because they have to account for the amount of youth that are coming in and out, that sort of thing. So that was something that became a challenge for us that we were trying to figure out. So in the future, if maybe we were to figure out how to work out the fiscal budget, maybe how could we do it cheaper so the state appreciates it a little more, that would be great. And I just want to point out that this bill is not a handout, as some people would call it, or a hand up or whatever. It's an investment, right? Because the Washington State Institute of Public Policy, as you see on the slide, found that for every $1 invested into the youth in this program, you get $3.95 in return. So you consider the amount of youth that are in this program and the amount that would be able to attain some kind of post-secondary credential, whether that's an apprenticeship, whether it's college, something like that, then they will make an insane amount of money off of the taxes that those people will pay over their lives as compared to how much went into them. So it's a great bill, and politics is a long game. So if you're interested in pushing for it again, let me know.
Thank you, Curtis. Just want to take a second. Does anybody have any quick questions on this? We can keep going and then we'll hold that for the discussion part. But we were just so pleased that Curtis was willing to join us today to talk about this, because this is exactly kind of tying it back to what we spoke about at the beginning. It's so important to hear from those who have that lived experience, and in Curtis's case, professional experience, who can just speak from that place with legislators about the impact. And again, those of you who heard from Senator Trudeau, that was exactly her message. It makes for better legislation. So, and Curtis is right, politics is a long game. So we already saw there was those
turmoil.
Sorry,
I averaged 9 to 9.
bills last year that that did not get passed, and after you take a deep breath at the end of the session, you start to think about and work with partners and legislators towards, okay, what's next? How do we move? Are those bills viable to move forward, and how do we do that? So interim work looks like the implementation of the bills that are passed, and that's the timing and how that works depends on the bill. But as those who are with state agencies know, a lot of it falls on state agencies to do that work. And that is also an area where kind of input can be helpful. I think there are definitely state agency partners who do that outreach to get that perspective. But that's something to think about too, how we could do more to help support good implementation and legislation. Then as far as looking ahead, so one of the best times to really build relationships with members of the legislature is during the interim. You might end up being able to sit down and have a meal with them, but at least like a thoughtful discussion over a cup of coffee rather than a rushed 15-minute during session meeting. So strongly suggest you consider using this time to reach out to legislators that you want to build relationships. Even if you don't have a particular bill that you want to work on, relationships are a big part of it. And then of course, there's the crafting of legislation, or if you already have an existing bill, does it need to be modified? And then that work with partners, and eventually at some point in that process, of course, with a legislator and more legislators to build support for the bill, and to, of course, ultimately get a sponsor for the bill. We're so short on time. We had so much to cover. I just wanted to make a quick note that even though it's not till next fall, we're already seeing the impact of elections, that forthcoming elections, kind of the political impact is in play, because the governor has announced that, this is the first time that the governor's office is kind of up for grabs in quite a number of years. So that there's a ripple effect there with a state senator has already announced, Senator Mullet, as well as Bob Ferguson, our attorney general. And then that frees up House members who are looking to take the Senate seat. We also, all the statewide electeds are going to, their offices are going to be up for elections. So our superintendent of public instruction will be running for his office. There's interest from at least one legislator in that seat. So for those of you who do get kind of involved at some level with advocacy work, that's certainly the reality is there of how the political shifting and politicking and supporting candidates kind of plays in. So with that, we have just a few minutes, but I would love to invite questions or comments.
I posed a question also in the chat. I'm curious to hear from you all about it, out of the ways Juliet talked about, if there are any that seem realistic for you to get involved. So feel free to answer that as well.
Thank you, Colleen. Yep, thank you, Curtis. Yep, thank you, Fred. Okay, and as you can see, Mustafa dropped a survey in the link, so we appreciate your feedback. And as you can probably tell, this is an ongoing conversation for the PLT and the WPN. We're really serious about doing policy work by really using the lens of lived experience and giving the whatever you need as as professionals in this work in whatever capacity works for you to be able to bring that voice and that perspective forward. So please, again, reach out to me, to Emily, if you need guidance, if you have questions, if for whatever, in whatever way we can support, and stay tuned for further opportunities to through the PLT or WPN be engaged. Thank you all so much for coming today. Really appreciate all of you, and happy summer. We're almost to the solstice. Thank you again, Curtis.
So much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all for listening.